Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever heard that your spending goes down in retirement? Well, not always. At least not right away. Yes, over time, retirement spending does tend to go down. But for some retirees, especially in those early years, it actually goes up. Sometimes way up. And if you're not planning for it, this little surge can totally mess with your retirement math. So let's break it down today. What is this retirement spending surge? How long does it last? And who does it hit the hardest? Because the thing is, it's actually a fairly well-known pattern. It's not totally random. And once you know about it, it's totally manageable and you can plan for it. The retirement spending surge is exactly what it sounds like. A period of increased spending that tends to happen right around the time someone retires. For some, it's a few big trips, or for others, maybe it's finally renovating that kitchen, or helping their children out financially, or maybe it's just fitting in some things that they didn't otherwise have time to do while they were working. And hey, this can be totally fun. You've earned it. But the thing is, you want to make sure you budget for it so that these handful of years don't throw off the decades of your future retirement. According to research from JP Morgan Asset Management, about 35% of retirees experience a spending surge in the early years of retirement. That's more than 1 in 3. That's not really something that I would call rare. And here's the thing to focus on. It's really hitting your typical everyday retiree. The first group it hits the hardest is the partially retired households. These are folks who are easing into retirement. Maybe they still have some part-time work or consulting work, but they also are pulling from their retirement accounts. And in a way, many of these retirees or partially retirees feel like they're given permission to spend because they still have some solid income streams. But we find in this situation, we have people who have more freedom, which tends to get filled with trips or sometimes big spending surges in other areas, and they have lesser income coming in. So this can be a bad mix if you don't pay attention to the spending. It's also especially common for households with pre-retirement incomes under $150,000 and middle-of-the-road net worths. Not the ultra-wealthy, not those living paycheck to paycheck just trying to make ends meet, just your typical median retiree. So mainly the retirees that most of us can relate to. So if you find yourself in this middle zone, it's not only possible, but it's likely that you could find yourself in this situation. So that means planning for it is not just a luxury, it's absolutely essential. So when does this surge happen? Well, usually this bump in spending tends to start 1 to 2 years before retirement. This is when we tend to see people spending more. They finally get around to those home renovations that they've been putting off for decades. They start gifting more to their children or their grandchildren, or maybe they start to plan that once-in-a-lifetime trip. Then it typically continues for 2 to 3 years after retirement. And that makes sense. You've got more freedom at this time and you want to make the most of it. So really what we're looking at is a 4 to 5 year window where spending can be quite elevated. And how big is this surge? Well, most retirees who experience a spending surge see their expenses go up 5 to 10%. But for some, that increase could be as much as 25% higher than previous spending levels. Maybe it is that once-in-a-lifetime trip, or maybe it's helping a child with a down payment on their first home. Let's look at an example. Let's say your typical spending, not income, your typical spending is $90,000 a year. We want to focus on spending because this is what matters most when we're building a budget. And let's say in this example, you do all the things that we talked about. Maybe 2 years before going into retirement, you start to give your kids a little extra financial help. Once you step into retirement, you take a big trip with your spouse, and maybe you finally upgrade those things around the house that you've been putting off. And let's say ultimately you have a 10% increase in your spending. So that means you're now spending $99,000 per year instead of $90,000. That's an extra $9,000 a year for 5 years. So you'll need an extra $45,000 to cover this surge. And remember, this isn't long-term money. This is money you need right away. So you need to keep it liquid and easily accessible and kind of separate from your traditional spending. All right, let's talk about what you can actually do with this information. Set aside this surge amount in advance. Don't ignore it, just budget for it if you know that your spending is going to increase. That extra $45,000 from our example, that's on top of your regular retirement budget. So make sure you set it aside and account for it. You might have to adjust your final working years. Those last few years right before you step into retirement, they really are a golden opportunity. They're making sure that you launch into retirement in the best possible way. So if you know you're going to have a surge in spending, maybe you need to increase your savings rate. Maybe you need to work a little bit longer to make sure you can cover this surge in spending or the elevated spending you anticipate as you go into retirement. But make sure that you plan for it. Use a flexible withdrawal strategy. Don't go too rigid with your retirement withdrawals. Consider a bucket strategy or maintain a cash reserve that lets you spend more early without derailing your long-term plan. And remember that retirement is dynamic. You're not going to be spending the same amount every single year. So just keep reviewing your retirement budget as you go and adjust accordingly. Here's the danger. If you don't plan for this early surge in spending and you start withdrawing more than expected in those first few years, you're not just spending a little extra. You're pulling money from your portfolio before it's had time to grow in retirement. This is really when your portfolio is most vulnerable, and it can put you at a greater risk of running out of money later on in life. Think of it like this. If you take big bites out of your portfolio early on, you ultimately hurt the ability for your portfolio to compound for decades ahead. And if you experience a market downturn early on in retirement, well, this can put you in an especially vulnerable position. So planning ahead isn't about just budgeting. It's about ensuring the longevity of your portfolio. But here's the good news. This surge in spending, it's just temporary. Once you've done the big trips, once you've made those home improvements, once you've helped your kids, maybe you can sort of relax and settle into a slower paced routine. Maybe you travel less and maybe you eat out less. Maybe your priorities just shift over time. And truly, health factors can really start to influence spending. Mobility and medical needs or just plain energy levels can bring your expenses down over time throughout retirement. There's also a psychological shift that happens. Once the newness of retirement wears off, many retirees just find that they seem to spend less, and this really helps to preserve their portfolio long term. So where exactly does this money go during this surge? We've touched on a handful of the categories, but the biggest one by far is travel. Maybe it's a bucket list item, maybe it's some family trips, but travel is the number one category spending for new retirees or soon to be retirees. The next biggest line item tends to be home renovations, whether that's repairs that were put off or maybe it's even buying a secondary property. The next three categories that tend to see the biggest surge, well, healthcare is a huge one. A lot of people tend to put off some health-related issues during their working years because they're so busy with family and with work. And once they step into retirement, they have more time to dedicate to themselves. We also see a big surge in family support, whether this is helping children with college or weddings or a down payment on a home, all of which I think are wonderful things. If you're in a position to help your children, that's amazing. And we also see a surge in hobbies and lifestyle spending because a lot of retirees take on new hobbies when they have more time. This surge doesn't have to derail your budget. Just make it part of a plan. If you go into retirement expecting to spend less from day one, but you find yourself spending more, this could cause you a lot of stress. But if you expect to spend more, at least in those first few years, and you plan for it, well, now you can sit back and relax and not have this fear that you're going to run out of money. Retirement is your moment. Make sure that you enjoy it completely guilt-free and make sure that you're well prepared for it. So what are your thoughts? Did you experience a retirement spending surge, or are you heading into retirement soon and are you planning for it? Let me know your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Start 1 to 2 years before retirement actually. So if you know that you're going to have a spending surge, make sure you budget for it. Because maybe you didn't have time during your working years. I probably shouldn't put quotes in it, but we really do put off our health, and we shouldn't. don't put off your health until retirement. Well, now you can kick back and relax and enjoy without being fearful that you're going to run out of money. That's very upsetting. It's not random. It tends to follow a very